Hello and welcome to Working Lunch, the SLO Chamber's weekly series where we get to sit down with key community leaders and hopefully enter the last few hours of our work week feeling a little more connected in these challenging times. I'm Jim Dantona, President CEO of the SLO Chamber, and today you'll get a peek behind the curtain of the work of a congressman in this time of tremendous change. We are, of course, talking with our Congressman Salud Carbajal. He has represented the 24th Congressional District, which includes all of Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties, since he was elected in 2016. Over the past few weeks and months, we at the Chamber have been in touch with the Congressman and his team and have invited him to lunch today to talk about what things are like in DC, get his take on what's going well and places we still need to improve, and maybe some do-it-yourself advice he could give us. So thank you so much for being here, Congressman Carbajal.
Thank you very much, Jim, for inviting me today. Thank you to the SLO Chamber, and thank you for all the leadership that you guys have demonstrated, in particular during this pandemic crisis. You guys have just been a great stakeholder in being part of all the solutions that have been put forward, and now the reopening, starting to reopen in a safe, constructive way.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And you've been such a great ally to us and really helping us connect, whether it's the SBA or some of these key pieces of legislation that need to get done. You've been a tremendous support. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so looking, obviously, where are you zooming in with us today? Where are we at?
Well, in keeping with the theme, the Chamber of Commerce, I decided to come have lunch today at the Taqueria Santa Barbara here on State Street, and set up shop here. They let me set up shop, which it's also allowing me to see how the social distancing and the reopening is occurring. And based on everything I'm seeing, everybody's wearing their masks. They set up a good social distancing perimeter, and things are going well. And I've already ordered some tacos, by the way. They may bring them while we are having our program, and I'm looking forward to them as well. But that's where I'm at today.
Love that you're supporting the local businesses, and yeah, so great to have you getting to see directly how all of this is working. So appreciate that. So tell us a little bit about what's a day in your shelter life with being a congressman. You're getting a little different view than the rest of us.
Well, it's somewhat similar than everyone else. Don't forget, for a number of weeks, we also sheltered at home. And just like everyone else, we were conducting all our business from home. I've been on so many Zoom meetings. I think I understand it now fully, but not. So many conference calls. As you know, with so many stakeholders, I've been able to touch base with out of my own home, out of my own dining room table. And it's been quite an experience getting adapted to this new normal of continuing to do my work and interfacing with constituents, groups, stakeholders from home. And so it's been no different than anyone else. It has been different in terms of Congress, because now Congress has passed, as you might have heard, new rules for the House. During this emergency and pandemic, we passed rules so that those that have chronic illnesses or are at risk have the opportunity to vote from home. And we also have the opportunity to conduct hearings from home remotely. So that's a new change, and that's something that has already started. We've already conducted a number of votes on the House floor. I did go back initially, and will likely go back as often as possible, but it may lend itself that I may have to do some things remotely on occasion, or vote remotely by proxy on occasion.
Yeah, that was actually one of the most interesting things in seeing some of those first, the care package, and where a congressman was literally holding the whole country hostage to make sure everybody came back and voted, and luckily didn't have to. But are you finding that this could be at least a new way of dealing with some of these crises, to being able to act remotely and be more effective in doing your job, and rather than traveling 3,000 miles?
Well, certainly, especially those that are at risk, like I said earlier. But it's always best to be physically present. It lends itself to a different dynamic. And someday we'll get back to that again. But under the circumstances, we had to develop a system that allows our democracy to continue working. We have to continue to do the people's business. And this is one way that's safe, secure, that allows us to continue to do that. So I think it's important.
It certainly is. And I was so glad to hear that it actually got to that. So fabulous work by the Congress on that to do the work of the people. And obviously right now, go ahead, sir.
I was just going to say, keep in mind that during this whole process, this pandemic process, or crisis, should I say, Congress has now passed 5, 4 have completely made it over the finish line, economic relief packages. And the last one was a few weeks ago, which was the HEROES package. That one is still pending in the Senate. We hope they get with it and understand that the American people, businesses, workers, families still need a lot of assistance. And hopefully the Senate does their job and we can conference the 2 bills and get that out to the president for his signature so that we could continue to help small businesses with more resources, continue to invest in our public health systems, continue to help local government. Those that are unemployed, continue to help them as well. So there's a lot that still needs to be done, including infrastructure that is being discussed right now that will not only modernize our infrastructure, but continue to infuse our economy.
Yeah, well, you're reading my mind. I was just going to ask, in the HEROES bill, I think we have $15 billion for infrastructure. Is there hope that that kind of infrastructure support moving through the Senate would help just get that economy going?
Well, actually, just 2 days ago, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee that I'm a part of released our bill that we are going to mark up in a few weeks. And it's basically a half of $500 billion, $500 billion of infrastructure projects that are going to be reauthorized through the Surface Transportation Reauthorization. So in addition to the $15 billion that's in HEROES, if we're able to finalize and get that over the finish line with the Senate and then ultimately to the president, we also have this other bill now that we're working on that is comprised of $500 billion of investments throughout our country, transportation, broadband, all the different systems of infrastructure that would really help create more jobs.
Well, part of that, which is so interesting, you're part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, correct? And can you tell us a little bit about that, what that is?
Well, the Problem Solvers Caucus is a group of bipartisan representatives, members of Congress, that are committed to working together to find common ground. Republicans and Democrats, right now we have about 50 individuals that are members of that caucus. And we have done some really good work that tries to come up with a compromise that's a good starting point for the broader Congress to work from, whether it's healthcare, whether it's immigration, whether it's business, pharmaceutical reform, you name it. We've been doing quite a bit of work.
Well, it's one of those things I know as the general population, we haven't seen a ton of, right? That working across the aisle. And so it's so great to hear that is happening. There are legislators there looking to build that bipartisan coalition.
It's one of the most refreshing caucuses that I'm a part of that I look forward to meeting with every week or every month. As we meet quite often, actually, whether it's working on infrastructure, whatever the issue might be. It is a great group of individuals, again, trying to break that gridlock that Washington has become known for and really make our country work again. So just as we speak, I see Eva coming to drop off some tacos that I've ordered. Eva, you want to say hello to everyone? This is Eva. She is the owner of this business. And like I said, I wanted to come have lunch and do my part in helping small business. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And Eva, when did you open up your taqueria? A little bit over a month ago. During the stay-at-home ordinance, they got everything done. So they're getting going now with the reopening. Everybody's wearing their masks. Everybody's doing social distancing. And I'm doing my part to come eat and help small businesses. Thank you, Eva.
Is that now, sir, is that carne asada? What do we got there?
Actually, I have, well, first of all, I have the condiments here that I got in advance. A carne asada taco and a lengua taco.
Oh, nice.
Thank you, Evan.
You know, kind of, it leads to a funny question because your colleague, Congressman Tony Cardenas, always tried to get me to do the lengua. I couldn't do it.
I'm going to take you over that barrier. I'm going to get you to try the lengua. First of all, it's beef.
Yep.
It just happens to come from the tongue.
Correct.
And they take all the buds, taste buds off, and it's the most tender beef that you can have.
It's what everybody tells me, and maybe for you I'll do it, but I'll tell you, so far it's been a challenge.
I'll tell you what, have you ever tasted osobuco?
Yes.
It's very much like that, very tender, similar taste. It's wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, well, I look forward, we'll do this together then. I'll have you, walk me across on that. And kind of along that same line, and, you know, thinking back on, obviously, my time I spent working with Congressman Cardenas, you know, thinking about across the country in our own communities, you know, protests have carried on for days following the tragic death of George Floyd. And before you were a congressman, a supervisor, a Marine, you were a UCSB student with my former boss, Congressman Tony Cardenas, from the LA area. And Tony often talked about how his lived experience of the police term fitting the description shaped his perspective on social justice and passion for equality. I know you've shared a lot of those experiences and have spoken about the need for that national conversation about racism, inequality, and reform in policing. For those who may have not followed on your social media, can you elaborate a bit here?
Certainly. Well, you know, I think we're all a sum of our experiences. And as a person of color myself, I certainly understand those issues, perhaps a little bit more in some ways. But certainly the killing of George Floyd has reminded our country that while we have come a long way, there's still a long road ahead to really get to that just, equitable society that we want to see. Certainly, we need systemic change more effectively and to make more progress on that, because while maybe the majority of law enforcement are great at doing their job and great in fulfilling their oaths, there are officers that don't belong in law enforcement and need to be weeded out. And I think this is a call to our entire society to make sure that we put in policies and procedures to make sure that happens, that happens in law enforcement. But not only that, this is also a symptom of broader inequities in our society, be it healthcare, criminal justice reform, economic opportunity. We need to make sure that we are bringing about systematic change or systemic change throughout our institutions in our American society. And we need to do better. And this is catapulting us forward, reminding us that we need to be more aggressive and take action to create that just society we want for everyone, all Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's you're really kind of hitting on that point. I wonder if you think through these conversations, are the changes going to come from local up, or do you think the federal government will be the one to say, hey, we're going to fix this and bring it pushed down?
I think it's going to be both, from bottom up and top down. This is one where we all, at all levels of our country, from bottom up and from top down, we need to work collectively and simultaneously to root out these issues, to root out these injustices, and to fix our society so that it's more just and equitable. And this is going to require everyone, not just government. It's going to require all our institutions. It's going to require the private sector, everyone to come together and to work towards a collective outcome of justice and equity for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. It's, you know, it's so hard to watch what's happening. It's such a challenge, especially as we're going through, you know, we're coming maybe a little bit out of COVID, right into this, and the challenges keep mounting up. So I'm wondering, from a congressional side, how are you seeing with your work with your colleagues? Do you feel like there's, better bipartisan efforts because of all of this, or is it driving people apart?
Well, I think this is causing, for the most part, everybody to come together and come to terms with the reality that we still have many injustices, and especially for the African American Black community. They have suffered the brunt of these injustices through law enforcement, as we've seen time and time again, unjustified killings of innocent African American individuals. And certainly other minorities have experienced that as well. But this has really shed the light on the African American community and the injustices that occur there. And by the same token, many of the colleagues that I've talked about on both sides of the aisle are stepping up to the plate. Not everyone, but a good overwhelming individuals, a number of individuals are acknowledging that we are nowhere where we need to go. Well, we have come a long way, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be had. And I think there's an interest in exploring what those solutions are, be it legislatively, top down, bottom up, all levels of government, state, local governments, cities, counties, and certainly the federal government is part of the solution.
So how is all of it has, from the leadership, obviously there's been a strained leadership between the relationship between the executive and the legislative branch for a long time. Do you find that there's seemingly growing consensus, at least at the legislative side, from the Senate and the Congress, or between the two bodies in the Congress?
Well, on certain issues, there's certainly consensus. We've saw that through the economic relief packages that we passed in a bipartisan way, 4 of them, 4 out of the 5. And on a number of big issues, we oftentimes do come together. What you see is usually the bickering and the gridlock, but nobody ever focuses on the fact that the overwhelming majority of the bills we pass are bipartisan. But certainly on the big ticket items, there's a lot of rancor and discussion that goes on. Keep in mind, Jim, as you know from your days in government as well, when you were in government, now you're in business, our democracy is such that it really solicits debate. It's okay to have debate. It's okay to have discourse and different points of views. That's what our democracy is all about, debating different points of views. What we want, though, is a civil government where we don't get caught up in the lack of civility and we demagogue one another. We need to bring the temperature down on those attacks and focus on debate. Debate is healthy. Nothing's wrong with even being passionate, but we shouldn't demagogue one another, and we should lower the temperature so that we could continue to create more trust with one another, to create better relations. So at the end of the day, we're able to come together on the things we do agree on sooner rather than later and move those forward. So I think there's a lot of good, despite the gridlock that we see in Washington, that has been happening and will continue to happen. And as it relates to the pandemic, we could get into all the things that haven't been done or should have been done, and there will be a time for that in the future. But right now, what we need to do, as we consider this other economic relief package and infrastructure in the future, is come together to make sure that the resources that the American people need are being distributed, to get everyone back to working, to get everyone back on their feet, to get our economy back. That's what we need to focus on, and not just fighting. There will be times to look back and say what went wrong, what should have, could have been done. And certainly there's a lot of that with this administration, but we don't need to spend time going over that now. I think the people are seeing it for themselves, those issues that will be discussed later.
Right. Well, and as kind of now on to that, a little bit what we were talking about before, I know prior to starting this conversation, you had your mask on. So everybody watching, I want to know the congressman is cognizant of all of these things, and he's been doing those. So we appreciate you for our interview being able to do that. taking it off. But it's looking at some of these protests going on. That's a lot of people together. Are you concerned about whether a lot of these are going to lead to a problem with our COVID, the coronavirus issue?
Certainly, there's concern about that. And what I saw, I recently went to the first gathering that I was able to go to, and I saw a lot of everybody overwhelmingly. I would say 99 to 100% were wearing their masks, and as many people as possible practicing social distancing. But the social distancing is the challenge, and I think no doubt it will have a negative effect at the end of the day. And that's the downside to these protests. While they're important, that's something that inevitably will be something that will be looked at and see how the negative impact that it's having in terms of the pandemic. In my remarks that I gave yesterday, I reminded everyone, please wear your mask, please social distance, because we still have this pandemic in front of us. You can't forget that.
Yeah, that is such a key point. I mean, it's so easy to, I think we all want to forget that COVID exists anyways, but it's so easy to forget that when you're in these passionate situations and you're fighting and talking about these things. You've been super helpful in getting money back to our hospitals and our medical facilities to try and battle this. You think we've done, there's always more we can do, but has SLO County and Santa Barbara County really gotten itself in a good place to deal with a lot of these issues?
Absolutely. I think a lot of the resources have been distributed and are continuing to be distributed, whether it's a food bank, whether it's hospitals, whether it's public health centers, the PPP loan, the EIDL loans. We know for a while there were glitches. We just passed in a bipartisan way some fixes to the PPP Flexibility Act to allow businesses to have more flexibility to use those resources that were allocated and continue to be allocated. Certainly, I think we're doing well. We could always do better. And that's why the HEROES Act that the House of Representatives passed recently, that is now being hung up in the Senate, hopefully the Senate's able to move on it quickly so that we can come together, conference it, and get it to the president and get the money, additional resources out to throughout the country for businesses, individuals, schools, local governments, everybody that still needs money. We still haven't made our local governments whole, and they have stepped up and spent a lot of their discretionary resources on the alternative site medical facilities that have been stood up, like the one in San Luis Obispo. We need to make sure that they have the resources to pay for those and be reimbursed.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, great point. And again, so appreciative of your leadership in trying to make sure that these things are happening, because it will be felt, obviously, in our communities, and to both from a business side, but also from our residents who live here. That's going to have a major impact. I wanted to touch on one thing, and we only got a few more minutes, but the Federal Bureau of Land Management recently approved new oil drilling in the Carrizo Plain here in SLO County. Any thoughts about judicial or legislative path to reverse that decision?
Well, I have sponsored legislation to do that, the Central Coast Heritage Protection Act. But certainly, that was included in a broader bill that passed the House of Representatives. But until we get the same traction in the Senate and ultimately a White House that is bent on allowing more oil drilling off our coast and in the Carrizo Plain and public land, we're not going to make that progress and stop it. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to stop it by providing comment when they have these public processes and hearings to solicit input. We should continue to do that because it's good for the public record and it's good for further legal action for those groups, public interest groups that want to make sure that they file that legal action. But I've been very disappointed in this administration aggressively during the pandemic, during crises, that this administration, this president just continue to trample on our environment, trample on our public land, and all for the sake of giving oil companies this latitude and gift at the public interest expense.
Right. No, it's again, that's a beautiful spot in our community, in our region, and probably not the right spot to be.
But that just,
yeah.
Jim, but that just shows you how reckless these actions are. I wish the president, I wish more of his cabinet would come to visit the Carrizo, to see the magnificent treasure that it is, and the resource that it is for all Americans, whether it's Yosemite, it's all our national parks. This is a majestic place. As the Gaviota Coast in Santa Barbara County, we are lucky to have these resources, and we can't squander them away.
Yeah, well said, sir. Well said. Well, let's see if we can end on some fun, happy note. What are you you have anything you're looking forward to doing this weekend?
Well, first, eating these tacos. Secondly, it's my wife's birthday tonight. So we're going to start with a little at-home dinner. We're ordering in from a restaurant to help support local business. And we're not going to have many people join us, just us, the immediate family. And we're going to have a nice dinner and then continue to celebrate that over the weekend. I also have a number of nephews and nieces that are graduating, one family in particular in Ventura County. The youngest is going from junior high to high school. The middle child is graduating from high school, and the oldest child, she's graduating from Arizona State University, and they're all at home. So we're going to do a drive-by graduation parade of congratulations and cheer them on, and reminding them that while this pandemic happened on what their key milestone in their lives, that we're trying to help them remember it in a special way, with all the family caravanning by in cars, and that's what we're going to do on Saturday. And Sunday, I haven't thought that far out, but in addition to continuing to meet with constituents and what have you, and making phone calls and Zoom meetings, continue to enjoy my family.
That's fabulous, sir. Well, a big happy birthday to your partner, your spouse there. Wishing you guys have a great time. And we're going to let you get on to eating those tacos. Don't want them to sit. I don't know how lengua goes if it gets a little cold. So
yeah. Lengua's good anytime.
Well, that's fabulous. Thank you so much for eating lunch with us. For all of the rest of you out there, we hope to see you next week, same time, same place. We're going to talk to our SLO Chamber board member and Race Matters SLO County Executive Director, Courtney Hale, about her leadership, both in recent days, but also over the past few years, sharing resources and challenging our community to be a place where everyone can feel at home and be free to be their best authentic selves. If you have an idea for a future working lunch guest, send us an email at slochamber@slochamber.org. We thank everyone for tuning in, and Congressman, have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, and I also want to give a shout out to my daughter, whose birthday is on Monday, Natasha. So I can't neglect her; she'll be mad at me.
Good call. Probably the most important constituents you need to take care of right there.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. Have a great one.
Thank you too.